We write to survive, we write to feel, we write to heal. For care experienced young people, words can become a lifeline. And for Helen Archer, writing is both a personal refuge and a powerful tool for change. With 30 years in youth work, social care, and fostering, Helen joins us to talk trauma, creativity, and why living with young people, not just working for them, is a difference that matters most. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome back to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're sitting down with someone who brings lived experience and deep compassion to the conversation about trauma, care, and creativity. Helen Archer has spent 3 decades working with children and young people in a variety of roles, from nannying and social work to lecturing and recruiting foster carers. But it's her current role as a long-term foster carer with Hertford County Council, now going strong for over 12 years, that's closest to her heart. Helen's passion is clear. She believes in living alongside young people, not above them. She knows the complexities of teenage life through a trauma lens, and she encourages the young people in her care to process their stories through creative arts, especially writing. In this episode, we'll talk about the challenges care experienced young people face, particularly as they approach leaving care, why creativity can be a powerful therapeutic tool that young people in her, Well, creativity can be a powerful therapeutic tool, and how Helen manages the emotional weight of the work through her own reflective writing practices. So whether you're a carer, teacher, social worker, or someone passionate about building better support systems, this is a conversation about showing up, holding space, and giving young people a voice. So Helen, thank you so much for joining me this morning. When we chatted initially before the podcast, I thought it was like one of the really interesting areas you do is sort of on the writing side of things. So we'll definitely come on to that in a little bit. But you've held quite a few roles across the kind of the care and education sector. What keeps pulling you back to foster care?
I think in all the roles I've had, I think just working with these amazing young people, you really see the struggles that they have. And obviously for those of you that are social workers, you have caseloads. And you might only see a young person once a month, or if you're in assessment, a bit more regularly. But you work alongside them, but you never know quite the difference. I mean, you hope that you make a difference. I think that's why we're all here, isn't it? We all want to make a difference to children and young people's lives. However, what I guess I've noticed over the 12 years that I've been fostering is actually that ripple effect. So now the young people that I first fostered are now in their 20s, having children of their own. They're still coming back, still very much part of our family. And you can kind of see the difference you have made. And I think as much as, we want to make that difference, for me, I think the kind of person that I am, I think it's really that I just want to scoop people up and take them home. So when I was teaching, I had a young person that presented pregnant one morning, and at lunchtime, I took her straight to the council offices and was trying to sort her out with housing, and because she'd just been thrown out of home. And of course, she couldn't focus on her education because right there and then she was trying to just focus on survival mode. And And I think that's been the same in all my roles, where you kind of, my heart is to just really try and help these young people. But, that day I did get into trouble because actually I'd overstepped my mark as a teacher. Actually, we're there in the classroom, we're there to teach, but actually we shouldn't really be getting too involved in that social care side. So I think naturally that's where I naturally want to scoop up, take home. And I think for me, the difference that I see goes generationally rather than you dip your toes in, you hope you make a difference. But yeah, so I think that's really for me. I absolutely love day in, day out working and living and breathing all these teenagers that come into my house. And as you mentioned, particularly that trauma-informed practice that you absolutely need, which again transcends all the roles I've done. But actually, when you're living and breathing young people who have, had significant childhood trauma, I think for me, that's where I feel most that I can make that difference. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does, yeah. Well, in the introduction there, I used a phrasing that actually came directly from you, which was living alongside young people. So what does that phrase mean to you? And how does it kind of shape your approach to care?
I think living alongside means you see them at their best and their worst. It's not that dip in 1 hour session that you do with them, whether that's through CAMS, whether that's through teaching, whether that's through social work. It is literally from the moment they wake up to the moment, well, actually, some of them don't go to bed as teenagers. We have, they know they can call on me. In fact, even in the last week or so, I've had a 2 o'clock call and a 4 o'clock call where their PTSD, particularly at night, we know our young people really struggle going to sleep. For any of us, when we go to bed, that's when our mind starts to become most active, where we replay everything we've ever said, everything we've ever done. And actually for our young people, the night time is the hardest time. So when I say living alongside, that's the time that there's no professionals involved. There's no one else involved in their life. It's just me and them sitting up in the early hours, just talking through the difficulties and the feelings and all the things that our young people sit with. And then it's struggling to get them up and to school in the morning, because actually, let's face it, I often say to people, our young people have, significant mental health trauma, and they are, continuing to try to keep going. And actually, I've just had a girl move in a few weeks ago, and, we already are like, okay, well, we need to get them back into school. We don't want to miss education, which we don't. Education is crucial. However, if any of us had gone through what they've gone through, change of house, change of circumstances, all this PTSD flooding, everything that they do from the moment they get up, and actually them not coping, many of us would go to a doctor and get signed off with a sick note. Yet our teenagers don't get sick notes. They're told to they're resilient, they can push through. We can just, as long as we give them the support they need. So when I say living alongside them, it is really those really dark moments when sometimes I think, do you know what? I feel like I'm pushing them to school, or I'm pushing them into a place that I know doesn't feel great. And actually I need to advocate. And actually that girl, I have said, you know what? It feels quite abusive to send her back to her old school because she's moved areas. She's starting a new life. Yeah. All the professionals are like, well, we need to keep her in school. And I sat in a meeting going, actually, do we right now? She's moving school anyway in September. And so I think sometimes it is all the emotions, and it's 24 hours. But for me, it's sometimes just removing yourself from that professional hat and going, actually, what's the right thing to do? And then advocating for them.
I think that's that fundamental role of a foster parent, though, isn't it? As far as stepping in, especially for teenagers that sometimes don't know the best way of communicating in a professional way, or in a verbal way sometimes. So it's almost having an interpreter there that can speak the language of the professionals to kind of go like, this is what they're saying, this is what they're communicating to us, and we genuinely need to listen to them. So I suppose it's that trusted partner. almost, that you're kind of walking alongside, that's living the experience with them, that's kind of experiencing the pain and the empathy, but they maybe got that higher level of cognition and ability to kind of go, hey, this isn't okay for them.
Absolutely. And certainly when you said non-verbal, I had one young person that probably for a year just couldn't articulate,
Mm.
and particularly in meetings, because our young people, every few months there's like a meeting with all these people sitting around a room, talking about their deepest, darkest, toughest moments of their life. And a lot of them can't actually even, well, yeah, they can't even face it, let alone discuss it. And so, yeah, I had one young person that actually for the first year, I would sit in the car and she would sit next to me and we would text. And that is how she would communicate with me, because she verbally could not say what had happened, what was going on for her, what was going on in her mind. And then obviously I was trying to send her to school. And like I said, it's just, they're continually battling everything. So absolutely, yeah, you are absolutely their communicator and advocate.
So I know that you encourage young people that you care for to really explore their challenges through writing. Is a particular passion of yours, isn't it? So how have you kind of seen creativity help that process of trauma and or help them to build identity maybe as well?
So I think writing generally, I think, is very therapeutic, whether it's through journaling, some people blog. I think some people just write poetry, some people write short stories, some write from a this is my life, biographically, others write through characters. And what I've noticed over the years, and I've always encouraged my children and young people really, is to explore creativity anyway, whether it's through art, I think. Um, but specifically through spoken word, I think many CAMS workers will probably tell you when you come to therapy, a lot of our children don't know the words. So they might use sad, but what does sad feel like? What does sad look like? What does angry? Are you frustrated angry, or are you like, I want to kill someone angry? Are you like, where are you on angry? What does angry mean to you? What does it look like? So I think also a lot of our children and young people have had really, really bitty education. Whether it's through they've come into care and they've had lots of moves, or it could be that parents didn't really engage in education, so they weren't read to as a child. A few of my 20-year-old care leavers very much have had educational psychologists come in and assess them, and have all said, really, they just don't have the words. They just don't have that understanding of, and they kind of sometimes come across a bit dyslexic because they don't quite understand words, or, the way that we phrase things. So, yeah, I've got a big thing about reading to young people. I think if you get a teenager, offer them reading to them at bedtime. And I noticed this. So my very first foster child, she came into our lives at 13. And my children were 8 and 5 when we started fostering. And she noticed that every evening they would get half an hour. I'd go and read to them, and then I'd read to the next one. And then she said, would you read with me? And it hadn't even occurred to me. But actually, she really craved that half an hour, even as a teenager, sitting and reading with her. So I think it started really then that I started noticing actually children just haven't been read to. They haven't had words. They haven't necessarily had anyone invest in them. And then through that, through my own experiences, obviously a lot of us have experienced trauma in our own lives. I think that's often why we come into caring professions, is through experience ourselves. And what I noticed was that from my experiences, I wrote more fiction, more of a way of escaping. So what I started encouraging my young people to do is to kind of spend time in their day, whether it's a journal. So I've got a few that keep journals, or just writing. For one of my young people, she struggled to write at first, so I'd sit with her and I would journal for her, but she would tell me about her day. And it was just allowing her time to just really put into words her experiences. And then various young people, poetry is a really huge one. There's some really good poetry that my young people have found on TikTok. There's a big TikTok following where poetry gets shared. And actually, my young people have shared their poetry. And I think, again, the way it's received gives them validation. I think for a lot of us, that is, a lot of our young people are seeking validation for how they feel. I'd also say a lot of them do seek labels, like they need that validation. This is many of them over the years. In fact, I don't think I've had one that hasn't said, "What's wrong with me?" As you mentioned there, they don't know what happiness is. They don't know what their feelings, and they don't know what normal is. They don't know anything, and they just think there's something wrong with them. And so a lot of it is getting them to just sit with, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you, but you've gone through some absolute crap in your life. Don't know if I'm allowed to say crap, but you've gone through an awful lot of stuff in your life. And actually, it is going to have that effect on you. We know that trauma changes the way that the brain develops. We know that things don't sit in normal for you. So allowing them to kind of write through those feelings and put it on paper, because I think there's something about being validated. I think that's the biggest thing, and being heard. And so I've always encouraged writing. Often, like, there's my latest girlie that's just moved in with me. She's just started writing a story, because the moment they come in, I'm always like, let's start writing. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know what to write about." And I said, "Well, you could write about your life, or you could start a fictional story about a girl." And so we started with the girl, and then she's like, "Oh, I think it's going to be in space." So she started drawing monsters and things and creatures that might come up. And I just think it's really important for me as well. When you create these worlds, there's control.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And a lot of our young people feel completely out of control. So by allowing them to create a world where they decide what happens, they decide who comes into the house, who leaves the house, what happens, and there's the story of their characters. I think there's some it allows them really to just have some control over something. One of my girls, Kelly, she won't mind me mentioning her name. We adopted her as an adult. Now, a long time ago, you can't legally adopt as an adult. I should just say that. We're one of the very few countries that doesn't let you adopt as an adult. But we had a ceremony and we signed legal papers. So she changed her name and power of attorney. So for all intents and purposes, but I can't technically use the word adoption because our country doesn't recognise adoption. So she's started writing her life story as a way of communicating it to me. She couldn't. She has gone through a very, very traumatic childhood, and she struggled to say what had happened to her. So by writing it, she would let me read it. And then it I think she's on something like 60, 70,000 words now. And actually, she's become a qualified social worker now. And so she's actually writing her story, kind of like what happened to her, but also now through the lens of knowing more. So like where she feels things where she was failed, where she was. But it all started with her just trying to communicate to me what she had gone through, so that she could feel heard, and that I could understand her better. I just think with all professionals, I just use creativity around writing. So one of my young people, I've set the girl that really struggled to say how she felt, we text. I actually said to college, when she's really dysregulated, give her a bit of paper or give her a computer. Don't, because so many schools and colleges kind of ask you to sit there, don't they, in a room when something's happened, and you're facing each other, so the eye contact's there. Tell us what just happened, and they're straight into survival mode. My one goes completely shut down, freeze, and actually I'm like, take away that confrontation and just go into his bit of paper, just write down what you're thinking. And so for me, I think it's just really, really important that we just learn different ways of communicating with these children. But for me specifically, writing it's just got so many benefits to it. And more recently, my up and coming, when I did my book launch, I actually got a few of my young people that I fostered over the years came back and they shared their poetry. And I mean, they moved them to tears. It was just, they're incredibly gifted. And that is the power of words. And I love that.
There's some lovely stuff that you've gone through there. And just to kind of, draw back on a few of the little bits. I think when you were speaking there about reading to the children, I think that's something that's so counterintuitive for somebody to read to a teenager, because it does feel like, well, they won't want that. But it's kind of that regressed attachment building activity, isn't it? It's something they may never have had before, of somebody reading to them, and just that comforting nature of the soothing voice, the stories, the sounds, the voices that you may put in there. I can imagine you're a little bit dramatic in some ways with that. Yeah. So I should imagine there's some voices coming out. So humor, fun, playfulness, all coming out with that reading that story. But I think it is a bit counterintuitive to sit next to somebody or a teenager, read to them or anything like that. So that was lovely to hear. And I think that's something that hopefully people will take away with them as well. Maybe I should try that. But I think, as you said there about that, like, creative writing is something that is encouraged in schools, but it's often, but I'm going to judge you on it. And I think that's one of the problems, isn't it? That's what takes away from so much creativity. It's that fear of, but you're going to judge it and you're going to think it's rubbish and you're going to mark it and tell me where I did it wrong and where it's right. And I try and put a bit of poetry together and you're going to critique it based on whether you think it's good enough or not, whether it meets certain typical standards of poetry, which I don't understand sometimes with creativity, how anybody can mark art, because it's like, well, isn't it completely subjective? So do you think that the system kind of undervalues creative expression generally, as far as therapeutic work with young children, but also that maybe schools, parents aren't engaging in it as much as they could?
I think schools obviously have a marking system, and they're going to, it is like art GCSEs. I've had young people that have done art GCSEs, and I think sometimes, it's so undermarked because, art is, was it the saying, eye of the beholder, isn't it? It's kind of what your take on art is.
Yeah.
I think in relation to what you mentioned, so Kelly is publishing her book at some point. So she, but what we've done is, so there's the publisher that I have used, Cookies and Oxygen. They have two strands to them, and one of the strands is that you can publish as is. So they won't read and they won't critique. They will just publish, because actually Kelly and I were talking, and actually this is her lived experience. It's really personal. It's, and actually to hear someone even critique the writing or the style, that's incredibly personal. And actually, even as a writer, it's really hard. I mean, I haven't, so far I haven't met many haters, but, whenever you put yourself out there, as soon as you put yourself out there, you're opening yourself up to criticism. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world that's particularly kind online. And I think, Kelly and I have talked about it, and I've said to her, I think you need to do, Steve, who works at Cookies and Oxygen, is said that he would happily publish as is long as she's happy, to take away that criticism that, the professional world gives. I think you're right. I think when we know children and young people with care experience have done or published or presented, or whichever way they have shown their work, you'd like to think the world would be a little bit kinder with it. But what I do find is, talking about schools and education generally, they're not, considering what our young people have gone through, they're not always the most forgiving, or even the most, I want to say trauma informed. Let's keep it in professional. They're just not always you'd like them to just be really encouraging. But I do appreciate that schools sometimes do have their standards for GCSE levels, and I get that. But actually, if a child or young person is, you've got to remember, although they may present as a teenager, think of them as that 2 or 3 year old that's just presented you their first drawing. And, as parents, how like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Actually, I sometimes think when we look at teenagers, we forget actually that, we sometimes can be more critical because of their age. And we don't always, we need to remember that a lot of our teenagers just do not, they're not at their chronological age. They present much younger. And I think as such, our responses need to remember that as well. So
100%. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things I advocate for is shifting our own expectations about what we think they should and shouldn't based on chronological age and adapting it to where they actually are in all things. And that should be with all people, not necessarily, yeah. Um, so I know that you are still writing. Obviously, you've got one book down, but what role does kind of writing play in helping you manage, working in the sector you do, compassion fatigue and things like secondary trauma and stuff like that? Is it a big thing that you use to your benefit?
absolutely. I think I've mentioned before about, creative writing helps everyone, I think. Um, for me, I very much use it as escapism. A lot of people say to me, Helen, have you watched this on Netflix? Or have you seen this show? And I'm like, no, I don't really watch TV. I'm more of, if I get a moment's peace. And at the moment, my two newest young people have both come not attending school at the moment. So I'm homeschooling. From the moment kind of we're up in the morning and we're on teenage time at the moment, and particularly with the heat, they're up to about 11, 12. And then we're up early doing schooling. And so it's very, very hard. And something that I think all of us that work in the care sector have to remember is we've got to put the oxygen mask on first. So particularly in Hertfordshire County Council, they very much use the analogy. The reason we put the mask on the aeroplane is because we are no help to anybody if we are not able to function. And I think particularly when my young people and, a lot of them, they do break my heart. When you hear, recently this week I've had, Dad put out a cigarette butt on my arm and, visiting family homes to collect things that were just, the neglect is, it does break your heart. These are amazing children and young people and they should not have had, that start that they did have. And so, yeah, absolutely. My bubble bath is my precious time where I think it's the only time that I lock the door and it's like it's mine. But I do, whenever possible, pick up my laptop and just escape reality for a while. And certainly the characters I write are, there's a particular character that very much models a lot of the young people that I work with, that's come from quite a broken family, families making terrible decisions. Obviously, it's fantasy, so starting wars, so it's slightly different. But he's really struggling with, can I ever be good? Can I ever be, because of what I've done and because of what my family have done, can I ever redeem myself? And, a lot of our children and young people come with horrific guilt. I would say the guilt paralyzes them over, did I do something wrong? A lot of them think they're in care because they did something wrong or they didn't do enough or they didn't help mummy enough. I kind of explore themes that I'm feeling through my characters. I just generally think, I think writing can help all of us. And I just encourage people. And you might not even be good at writing. I started writing in my early 20s. I'm in my 40s now. I think to begin with, it was just writing. I never thought I would do anything with it, to be fair. I've actually written 6 books. I've never done anything with them. I play guitar and sing, and I've written an album, but I've never done anything with that because I live in fear a little bit of criticism from this is your heart. And so I completely understand our children and young people's vulnerability because you're putting yourself out there for people to say what they think. That just reminds me of how our young people feel when they sit in a meeting. But actually, it was one of my young people at Christmas a year ago. We were sitting and chatting and she'd written this amazing poetry. And I just said to her, you need to put this out here. People could connect to this. And she said to me, I'll do it when you do it. And that actually was and I suddenly thought, I need to stop. I need to role model. I need to be vulnerable as well. I need to put myself out there. So these lovely young people can see you can be brave too. So I did, and I published my book earlier this year. And that lovely young person came along to my book opening and shared some of her poetry. And she's like, I have to do it because I told Helen if she did it, I would do it. So, so I think it's role modeling bravery and vulnerability with young people. And writing has a way of making you very vulnerable, whether it's fiction or not, you know.
Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. What if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today. Now, I know as well as the writing side of things, you're a strong advocate for young people leaving care as well. What are some of the biggest challenges that you find that young people have and face, but that often go unseen?
I think for any of you that work with our care leavers, it's called the care cliff for a reason. It is like literally falling off a mountain or a cliff. But the government actually has done some research, and actually if you look at, there's a paper that they published. It's just hard reading, when they actually did some research into it. But basically, most of our children and young people, my son actually is hitting 18 this week, and it is such a different reaction to a girl that I had earlier in the year who's now left me. She turned 18 in March, and the difference between their approaches to 18 are insane. They're like just different worlds, and children who are turning 18 will never understand what turning 18 means to a kid in care. Yeah. And my young person and my other young person who turns 16 this year, we are already in meetings discussing independent living, how we're getting them ready for when they leave care. And she's 16 and she's petrified. Yeah. But they have to start the pathway planning and all the things that they do for when they start to leave care. And, this is fear that these children have, really real fear that the system kind of puts in, preparing them for when everyone leaves them. And actually what my lovely girlie who turned 18 this year, she said to me, because she only came to me at 14, she said, I finally got my childhood and now I'm trying to leave it. Like I finally feel happy and safe. I finally am getting to you go to theme parks, you go to zoos, you do all the things you do with kids. And she's like, I'm finally having this amazing childhood and now I'm being asked to leave it. She's actually going off to university. She's done really well for herself. She's absolute trooper. But she's like, she's moved out because she can't come back here. She could come back here. However, the system doesn't gear up to, so obviously as a foster carer, I do have a mortgage to pay. I have chosen not to work and to foster instead, but it's still my income. Now they won't pay you to just have an empty room for a child that's gone off to university. So already she was like, well, maybe I just don't go to university. Maybe I could just stay with you, or maybe I'll go to a local university so I can stay with you longer. And that's horrific. The fact that she's planning all her decision-making on how she stays with us. Whereas my son is just, he will stay with us because I don't think this day and age they can ever afford to leave. I've got a 21-year-old as well who, he's gone to uni, but he's chosen to go local. Again, for monetary value. But, but yeah, just the different challenges that face them when they hit 18 about how do I stay with my foster carers. Kelly's one who's talks very openly about the fact that she grew up in care homes, in hospitals. And when she left care, there's no one. There's not a foster family. All the residential staff stopped talking to you. You've left. And she was just put in a flat on her own at 18. Her mental health still significantly, because a lot of them, we all know, don't we? Trauma doesn't just stop because you turned 18. CAMS stops and you suddenly get onto adult care services, which are a whole other issue for me. But, all these services suddenly go, wow, you're not a child anymore. So, and actually your needs haven't changed. Your difficulties, your challenges have actually increased, because now you're supposed to have all of it together and be living life independently. And without really any support network other than, your leaving care PA who, all of it is that you're supposed to contact them. They don't contact you. So actually a lot of my children don't really fit. Well, I say children, they're young people, adults, even at 18. They don't have the confidence to ring and say, I'm struggling. That's huge to say I'm struggling. Whereas one of my girls, Courtney, again, she won't mind me saying, but Courtney, she's now 20, she'll be 24 this year. And, her car broke down. She rings us. If she gets a leak in her flat, she rings us. She got an ant infestation about a year ago. She rang, it was the summer. She's like, oh, I've got ants everywhere. And so my absolute heart is these kids, that they are, they're only 18. I know they're adults, but they are, still very young. We know chronologically 18 doesn't mean 18. Yet suddenly services stop and, all the, money, I don't know if you do know, but young people in care obviously get given quite a bit of money monthly for their clothing allowance and pocket money. And I almost think sometimes it's quite unrealistic. So my current 16-year-old gets £165 a month, every 4 weeks, which is not quite 16, so it'll go up when she hits 16. But yeah, so all the way to 18, they're getting this wodge of money. I think my girl that left in March, a month ago, that turned 18 in March, I think she was on about 185 by the time she left me. Suddenly that all stops and they're on universal credit, which is what, £50 a week? Oh my God, something is. But that's to pay for their bills, their food, and, it's crazy, really. And then on top of that, we know that a lot of them then feel quite isolated. So then the conflict over, do I contact my birth family? Because obviously they've hit 18. Again, where contact was maybe supervised or contact with their family, there was a schedule. Suddenly all that's gone. And they then have to manage that themselves with feelings of how, I don't even know how I really feel about my birth family. I love them, but I also really don't like them and the decisions they make. Yet they're contacting them and they don't feel guilty if they don't contact them. But then, for instance, one of my, Courtney, came over and had been in contact, and, she feels sad sometimes after she's had contact with them. And, actually then you have all these feelings and they're still only little, and managing life with, complexities that we will never understand or really feel. So I think there's all of that. Services depleting. Also, for instance, things like, I don't know about you and people that you've spoken to, but a lot of our young people, I would say, don't get their GCSEs. I think actually the tip for me, if someone said to me, what's the hardest age? I would say 14 and 15. I think the identity issues, the peer pressure, I think the school pressure to do well, to know what you want to do, the GCSE, the homework's ridiculous. And on top of that, they're trying to manage all of this, huge trauma, emotional weight, and managing contact with their family still. And and I think, a lot of mine get into their 20s, and that's when they start to kind of settle a little bit. We know the teenage brain. We know that, early 20s, it all starts to settle down, and you kind of become more adultish in your thinking and your processing. And actually, it's then that they really want to do education. But at that point, it's really hard for them when they're living independently. I've got a girl now, Courtney, who really wants to go and do a degree. She's now at a point where she's like, I really want to do this. I want to get a degree. And we've been looking, and it's, universal credit stops when they start, education. And actually, it's just tough, isn't it, for them? Like, everything about adulting is hard, but for them, it's on another scale. So, but I won't go. But I am passionate. I would talk for hours about the care cliff.
No, it's absolutely fine, and it's raising that awareness of things that most people kind of take for granted, or those little bits of just, as you said, your car breaks down, you have somebody to call. And obviously having a foster family, and that is amazing if you've always had that positive relationship with a foster family, to be able to have that. And not all kids do have positive relationship with their foster families. If they're coming from a children's home, who do they call in that circumstance? And it is really hard to call a random person that you've never known, as far as that.
Absolutely. I started. Well, it all started really with Kelly. How we met Kelly was. We met Kelly when my friend, who's a social worker who I know through work, we've remained friends, and she told me about this care leaver with a 6-month baby who basically was going to be spending Christmas alone. So a lot of our children and young people, well, they're not children at this point, they're 18, although some do leave care at 17, 16, 17. So, there are some children out there, but they actually can spend Christmas alone. It might not be safe for them to be with their families. They might not have any friends. So Kelly was going to be on her own for Christmas, and I was like, that breaks my heart. So my friend put us in contact, and we met her in the November. And I said, how do you feel about coming to us for Christmas Day? It is crazy. We are a household of 7. And she was like, very timid, very scared of us, rightly so. And she came for Christmas, and then we kind of befriended Kelly. She was very isolated. We kind of kept meeting up, and then COVID hit in the following March. And she rang me because obviously, do you remember that there was no toilet rolls? Everything was coming from the shelves. It was like that crazy time. And she was just
in that new world. It's terrifying.
Absolutely. She was petrified. And I just said, move in with us. We'll make it work. She slept on a sofa in the conservatory, and Julian had a travel cot. And I said, we're just going to make it work. And for those 3 months, and she said, it was her first time of having normal life in a family. I think it was very strange and alien to her. But I think she said she missed it, actually. When life went back to normal, she really missed being part of it. And obviously we've stayed involved with her. We've now done the adoption. But actually what it really did highlight to me is how many of our children and young people spend Christmas on their own. And actually, if all of us just could take one child, one looked after, care experienced adult into our lives, actually what that could look like. So I then started with my friend Penny, and who's the social worker, and my friend Karen, who's another foster carer. We started Closer, which stands for Care Leavers Ongoing Support and Resources. And we just looked for local funding originally, and we just, every Christmas, we've had 3 of them now. We put a Christmas party together for all the care leavers in Hertfordshire. And the main aim of that party was building networking, building relationships, and with each other as well, because lots of care leavers don't really know each other exist. So even if you could put, and actually I know from the first year we had the party, and then we got a text to say that a few of the care leavers actually met together over Christmas, which was lovely. And then at the last party, a foster carer came up to me at the end and said, because we get foster carers transporting the young people in as well. So it's all just completely relationship building. And then lots of people donate food, like Aunt Bessie donated all our food. MPs gave us some money so we could really give gifts, really spoil them. And then, a foster carer last year said to me at the party, the girl that I bought in the car is going to be on her own at Christmas. Can I invite her? And I said, yes, that's why we do it for 18. It's 18 only, because they can make their own decisions then. But actually that was, just another one of those moments where a foster carer and a young person connects, and you just think, that's great. So yeah, my heart is really just building relationships for care leavers, letting them know that they're not alone, letting them know that people do care. It's just getting people connected. So yeah, that's really, really my heart and passion. And obviously every year we do it. We're hoping to be able to do summer events. We were hoping to do summer events this year, but unfortunately I've got a little bit busy with doing homeschooling. So we haven't been able to do a summer event this year, but we're hopefully going to start running 2 events a year and just building their social network really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really meaningful kind of effort, and hopefully if people out there can hear in the podcast, they can kind of maybe reach out and see if there's anything else that they can do and contribute towards it. It sounds like a really worthwhile project. So obviously you've been on a journey, you've got a lot of experience, and it sounds like you've had some really positive outcomes from some of the young people that you've had, but I'm sure you've also maybe had some real challenges along the way as well. Have there ever been moments where you've kind of questioned, whether you could keep going, and kind of what brought you back to it?
So many occasions. I think if we're honest, we not all sometimes just want to quit their job and run away.
Mm-hmm.
I have noticed over the years that my survival response is flight. And I often know that when I start scanning on Rightmove, I'm triggered. Right, if I just start looking at a cottage by the sea, just me and my husband.
Love it. Love it.
So I think you start to recognise in yourself. For me, if I start scanning Rightmove, that's it. I know I need to go and have some time. I think for me, I started fostering when our children were very young. So they were 5 and 8 when we got our first foster child. Obviously, we started the process earlier than that. Yeah. My son has autism. He's now going to be 18 next week. And, raising someone with autism is difficult enough, let alone with lots of change in the house. Alex, who's 21, he, was 8 when we started. And we've regularly had police in the house. We've had professionals in the house. We've had, the fact that he's gone into social work, I think there's an element of, he's, been indoctrined into it all from a young age.
He already knows it all.
Yeah, I just, I think fostering, when people say to me, and this is where I was answering your question, I think it absolutely has had sometimes negative effects on my children and us as a unit of 4, because we never went into fostering to have more children. Yeah. We absolutely were really happy and content with our little family. I loved our family, but what I did think is I have a heart to love someone else and to bring them alongside us and journey with us, but always remembering they have their own family, but they can come and be part of ours too, and that's great. But what it did mean was, a lot of our children, all of our children and young people come with attention-needing behaviour. They need it. They do need it. It's not a negative. I don't like when they're like they're attention-seeking or attention. And actually, no, they just need you. They need you to notice them. They need you to love them. And so, yes, they might do behaviours that get your attention, but actually, they're telling you they need you. So for me, that has meant sometimes I prioritise their needs over my own children, which has been difficult. We have had children that have hurt my children. And we've had, if you'd asked Ben, it must have been about maybe 7 years ago. We had a very difficult placement. For obviously our children are asked every year, you go to a review. Sometimes it goes to panel. And as part of that process, your own children are spoken to about how they feel about fostering. Right, okay. And Ben said he hated it. And so that, that was really hard to hear. Yeah, but at the time, what we learned really is, so Ben, being autistic, will verbalize very, there's no grey. It's very much, I hate it. But actually what it was he hated the placement that we had at the time, the child that we had, who wasn't very kind, did hit Ben, would go into Ben's room and take his stuff. And so Ben did hate it, and rightly so. They were only with us for about 12 weeks, and I cried pretty much every day. But for any of you that are in the business, you know that we do not have enough foster carers. And actually that little boy was lovely. Do you know what? He made such progress with us for 12 weeks. He just had he just needed to be in a solo placement where he was an only child.
Yeah.
And I would say that I've had a few of those. We are a busy household now, and sometimes they don't always get the attention that they need because of so many conflicting needs in the house. Competing needs. And so the young people then ramp up their behaviors, don't they? When they're not feeling like they're being seen or heard, they ramp those behaviors up. So we have had really difficult placements and very difficult behaviors. Some that have hurt my dog, have hurt my children, and I still sit here and say it's the best job in the world. But you need to know the risks when you get into it. You need to make sure you've got the right support network. And you need to make sure that you always have time for your own children and for all the children that you care for. So I think it's a carefully balanced, needing to give everyone time, making sure, that they're all seen and heard. But definitely, and obviously, we've never had an accusation made against us, but obviously we live in a world where children can. So you're all the time thinking about safer caring. And obviously, I've mostly fostered girls and I have 2 teenage boys. So, there was always that you're always just being really mindful. I think it's difficult. And I think because it's 24/7, it's like a job like no other. You never leave it, and you never get a break from it. But that is why it's so important to have those support networks and have a really good supervising social worker. I always say to people, if you do not have a good supervising social worker, or you don't trust your supervising social worker, you need to raise that, because you have to be able to feel free to share. I've run fostering before, and I will wear my heart on my sleeve, and I've run them and I'm like, I feel like I need to murder a child, and I'm not actually going to murder a child, but you just need to feel safe to be able to just say, I am not coping right now. And that was on a day where my girl, who's now 26, I had gone to Asda. She was supposed to be at college, and I saw her at the bus stop, and I was loading my shopping in the car, and I rang her, and I watched her look at the phone and hang up. And then I rang her again, and she hung up. And so I put the shopping in the bag, and then I started driving after the bus, continuing to ring her. She's not picking up. And then all of a sudden, the red mist dissolved. And I was like, Helen, what are you doing? At the end of the day, she's going to she'll contact me at some point. But I just needed to ring fostering and go. So, I think there are always moments when you think, why am I doing this? It's 24/7. It's really stressful. It's really hard. It puts pressures on your own relationship, because some of the children will play you off against each other. And the challenges are real, but actually the rewards outweigh that. And when you can get it right, you change not only a child's life, you change generationally afterwards. That their children and their children, for all of us, the reason we're in this is we want to break that cycle of abuse. And certainly fostering allows me to break it in a way that no other role ever has, which is why I stick with it. But I do think, fostering isn't for everyone, and that's okay. But I just think if you have a heart and a home and you think you can make a difference, by far it's the most rewarding job you'll ever do. And certainly I always say, in fact, for a while we were the face of fostering for Hertfordshire. We were on buses and billboards. And the tagline they used from interviewing me was, fostering keeps me young. And I stand by that. Kids, the things they come out with at the moment is skibbity toilet. And, the words they come out with that just don't mean what they used to mean to us.
Yeah. Oh, you have to learn a whole new language. Yeah.
It's totally new. And I find myself, because I'm with teenagers 24/7, almost becoming a teenager and using this so badly. And they love recording me on, their phones as I order things from McDonald's, repeating word for word what they've asked me to repeat. So you can have a lot of fun, and it keeps you young. And so if I would say to anyone, if you have a heart and a home, do it. It's tough. I want to quit probably on a daily basis, because not only is it the impact it has on you, and your family, but also hearing their stories. sometimes it does break me. Like I sit in the bath sometimes and I won't ever let them see me, but I just sit and cry because you just think, actually, what a world we've lived in that these kids have had these experiences. And I just think they need people that are going to advocate, that are going to be strong for them and that are just going to love them unconditionally and just meet them in their world and be in their world and do life with them.
Oh, that was an advert and a half as far as the journey is concerned. Definitely. There was some, and that's it. And thank you so much for your openness there. Genuinely, I think that's one of the things that anybody who's looking to become a foster parent or thought about it, I think that's the journey you just went on there, as far as your journey almost went on, is something that they need to hear, because sometimes I think it's this road tinted glasses that people go in with, and other times people are genuinely really struggling. I always try and teach them, it's not that you can't, it may just be too difficult. And if something's too difficult, it doesn't mean that you're not capable. It means the resources aren't available. You haven't got the support network around you. The placement's not quite right for the child as well as for you. And that's not any kind of, but that's really hard. And again, it's that self-awareness. Obviously, you've been on an incredible journey of self-awareness to get to the point that you have.
And I think fostering, when people say to me, I think you need to look at, it's always the time that you have with the child. That's the journey you go on. And it might be a day, it might be a few weeks, and it might be a month. And people will say, is it hard? If it wasn't hard, I wouldn't do it. You have to love them and you have to be all in for these kids. However, there's a young person and I spent a long time crying over whether we should, the placement was right. And we sat in meetings and eventually CAMS were like, she needs to go into a household where she's an only child. She needs that. It's not you. It's not what you're doing. This is just what her needs are. And for a long time, I felt terrible that I couldn't meet those needs. I felt really guilty. Anyway, I'm still in contact with her. We see her most days. She's gone to my friend who's a foster carer. And you know what? She's thriving. And sometimes you can feel really guilty and you sit in those moments going, is this the right decision? But actually, it's being brave and going, this isn't right for us. It isn't right for the child. And actually, they can thrive somewhere else and that's okay too. And also, the system isn't perfect. And we don't want them to move a lot, but actually sometimes a move can be incredibly positive. And I think sometimes it's just focusing on, although it can feel negative in the moment, it can absolutely have a really positive effect.
Yeah. So obviously you got your first book published, but is that the end or is there plans for more? And so what does the future hold? Oh,
Bonds of Betrayal. So this is the first in a trilogy. Like I said, I've written 6 books. But this is a trilogy. The next one's hopefully coming out in November. But I hadn't factored in homeschooling. So we're really up against it. I was supposed to be with the editor by the end of July, but I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. So I'm up against it, but I love a challenge. So that's that. There's going to be more in that series, but there's also another series that I wrote that actually one of my young people really loved, which is more just set at university in real life. Mm-hmm. And she really connected with that. So that might be coming out February, March again, when I have time for these things. But it's not anything other than for the love of it. So if it takes a while, it takes a while. But yeah, absolutely. I think you just got to keep going and you just got to do what you love. Otherwise, life's tough for all of us. And in those moments that you want to quit, just remember, find your happy place. And writing is my happy place.
And are you going to carry on fostering as well?
Well, I imagine I will do it until I can no longer do it. And in fact, over the years, I've convinced a lot of other people to do it. So all my friends do it, which is quite helpful. And one of those was my mum. So my mum's a supported lodgings carer. And she's in her 70s and still going. So you're only as old as you feel. So as long as they're still keeping me young, I imagine I will do it for a long time. I do sometimes, I think I said to you, I really miss teaching. Probably of all the roles I've ever done, I miss teaching the most. I do go into universities and really talk about trauma because particularly in social work, because obviously I have got 2 young people that are doing social work degrees. And one of the things that both of them, trauma just isn't really spoken about. And I don't really understand how we're raising the next generation of social workers without really understanding trauma. I think a lot of focus on social work degrees is safeguarding, and rightly so, because that is the majority of what social workers do.
Mhm.
However, we've got to look at safeguarding through the lens of trauma, because a lot of our parents that we work with, we have to look at it through the lens of their trauma and the generational abuse that often accompanies the families we work with. So yeah, I do quite a lot of, I do really enjoy that. And I miss, I just want to get people passionate. I just really want to, just really embolden people really to just love these kids, have the tools needed to work with them, and to just really be the difference. Because I think it's really, we can get really bogged down in a system that thinks we just can't make a difference. But something that I say to everyone when I go and do talks is, you're the difference that a child needs. Your quirkiness, your unique you has brought you to this place, and you can be the difference. And there's an amazing, I think I said to you about the marble video, but a guy that did a talk, and he shows a child's life in marbles. And like, it shows a quite full jar with a baby that's just been born and those marbles, each marble represents a week of a child's life. And it's basically, this is the difference. This is the time that you have to make the difference. And then it shows you a 10-year-old that's kind of about this high. And then when it gets to a 16-year-old, it barely covers the bottom of the jar, because you've only got, for a 16-year-old to an 18-year-old, you've got 104 weeks to make the difference. And I think when we look at it like that and we think, do you know what, we can make that difference. They're not written off. We've got 104 weeks. Let's do this. Let's work as a team. Let's get them the support that they need. And so for me, yeah, I will always foster, because I have a heart and passion for these kids. But I am also really passionate about teaching and just really equipping the professionals of the future with the tools they need to understand these children and young people.
Beautiful. Well, I look forward to hearing more about your work, and obviously, we'll make sure we stay in touch with the podcast as to flow. But I should imagine this episode's hopefully helped a few people who listen to it. So, thank you very much for being so open and honest, and also sharing the journey that you've been on, and your young people have been on as well. So, thank you. So for any of you who've listened or watched this episode, if you find anything we've spoken about useful, emotive, or you'd like to find out more, then, and also if you want to read Helen's book as well, obviously if you're looking for a new good book to read, it is at holiday time, so perfect time to buy one to take with you. So the details to how to find Helen and get in contact with her will be in the show notes in the description. But otherwise, please like, comment, and share. But otherwise, thank you as well.